I mean, in the old ancient sort of stories, every hero goes through this, process of descent. Orpheus enters the underworld out of love, or Persephone is pulled down into the earth. Inanna, stripped of everything that she carries. Parmenides, taken down into the underworld to meet the goddess who teaches him how to see, how to hear again. And, often these are seen as myths about death, right? But there's a deeper meaning to them. Not necessarily about physical death, but they're initiatory myths about grief. Maps of the inner world. They show us that loss, that grief, that melancholy, that longing is not some sort of interruption to our path. It is the path. It's not an obstacle to the path. Which is the way that our world tends to look at it. I mean, grief, there's nothing quite like grief to open up the imaginal realms, an imaginal sense of things, a symbolic sense of things. It sort of has a way of cracking that shell, that armor of ordinary perception, and reveals some of those deeper, more subtle layers of reality, synchronicities, dreams, intuitions, imaginal figures, presences that have been waiting for us, feelings. And when the known world sort of collapses, the unseen world becomes more visible. The veil thins, the soul begins to speak. I mean, it's just why so many of the mystics trace their awakening, trace their deep soul healing, their deep spiritual transformation, not to bliss or clarity or ascension or rising above, but to heartbreak. I mean, just to be clear and just to name it, Rumi didn't become Rumi through his awareness meditation practice. Rumi became Rumi because Shams disappeared, because the beloved disappeared. If the beloved did not disappear, there would not be a Rumi. And of course, by Rumi and beloved, I am speaking a little bit about a historical figure who lived back in Konya, Turkey, but I'm also speaking about you. I'm speaking about you as Rumi, me as Rumi, and the beloved in our own lives. Sometimes appearing as a person, sometimes appearing as an inner figure, sometimes appearing as my physical health. Sometimes the beloved is infinite in the ways it will appear. I mean, the dark night of St. John, for example, or of the Christian mystics, that apophatic path of kenosis, of emptying out, it's not a metaphor. Kenosis isn't a metaphor. Emptying out isn't a metaphor. It's not a symbol. It's grief. It's embodied, felt grief. Disorganization and reorganization, falling apart and being reassembled. In alchemy, right, we speak about the nigredo, which is that blackening of the materials in the vessel, the salt, the sulfur, the mercury, the lead. The materials grieve. What they're doing in that vessel when they're being blackened is that they're grieving. They're yielding. The materials grieve inside of the vessel, and they're longing for union, and they're longing to become their essential basic nature. which is an alchemy. The metaphor for that is gold, of course, or the philosopher's stone. Some of you may know about Jung and his black books and his red book. Jung's descent into the red book really begins with the dissolution of everything he thought that he was. It doesn't start with bliss. It doesn't start with clarity. It doesn't start with certainty. Grief is the beginning of wisdom. It's the direct path. I mean, if we want to take these mystics seriously, we have to decide that for ourselves. It's certainly been my experience. And believe me, I tried many other ways. Whatever I could do to avoid that direct confrontation with the broken and the emptiness within me. And of course, it's not easy. It's not natural. It takes everything within us and more, to go into our embodied vulnerability and sensitivities and unlived material and to really feel and to metabolize all of that. We all have, as we've spoken about, our strategies to avoid a direct confrontation with that sort of primordial tenderness. I mean, that's so human and so understandable. It's reasonable. No shame, no blame, no beating myself up, no self-aggression for having these strategies. That's done. Let's be done with that. We want to lessen the intensity. We want to avoid it, to resolve it, to have it be somehow less disruptive, less achy, less painful. So that can be honored. We don't need to pretend otherwise. And, grief isn't meant to be domesticated. It's meant to take us somewhere that we would never go on our own. We would never choose to go into the shadow, to go into grief, to go into the somatic unconscious, to go with Persephone down into the underworld. It's not a choice that we make, that the ego makes, that this ordinary sort of sense of self makes, because it's a disruptor. That activity disrupts the status quo. And just like the beloved itself, is also, we might have the fantasy that we're going to domesticate the wildness of love or the wildness of the beloved's activity. But the beloved is beyond being domesticated. She, he, it, they, whatever, is way, way beyond all of that. Just like the beloved itself, grief, this confrontation will take us out of the matrix and into its own world for a few moments. Grief shows us what we love. It shows us what matters. It shows us what's real. It opens the heart in a way that nothing else can, in my experience, really. And this is why grief is often, this falling apart, this disorganization, this being taken apart, being dismantled by that energy. It's why it's the first gate, or the most essential gate, the one gate that every lineage, Greek, Sufi, Christian, alchemical, Tibetan, indigenous, the one gate that these lineages protect with such reverence. I mean, grief takes us into the underworld of the soul. It strips us down to that which cannot be taken and reveals that deeper sort of architecture of the heart. What's underneath that armoring, what's underneath that protection, that pure shimmering aliveness, that basic sense of aliveness. which we're all longing for at the deepest level, to just really be here, to be fully alive, that intimacy, that connection, that awe, that wonder, that basic causeless joy of just being itself. I mean, grief removes everything false in a certain way so that really that which is true can reveal itself.